All right, welcome and thank you for joining our webinar today, the Sudo Mode Part 2, How Privilege Mistakes Could Dismantle Your Entire Enterprise, featuring guest speaker, systems architect, and solutions expert at Secure, Christian Zaya. You're also joined by BeyondTrust product manager, Paul Harper, who will run us through an overview of the Power Broker for Unix Linux product after our guest speakers portion today, so please stick around for that. My name is Sarah, your webinar host today. Hello, everybody. A kind reminder to please submit your questions via the GoToMeeting console anytime throughout the webinar, and we will cover your questions at the end during our Q&A time. Also, a reminder, today's session is being recorded. You'll receive a follow-up email containing links to the recording and the slides shown here today within 1 to 2 business days from now. The slides can also be immediately downloaded via the handout section in the GoToWebinar console. You'll find that on the right side of your screen. Additionally, we now offer CPE credits through ISACA, and if you are attending for CPE credits and have an ISACA account, you must download the attendance verification document in the handout section now in order to submit proof for you attending today's session. Please note that you are responsible for reporting your own CPE hours earned to ISACA. Okay, now that that's all out of the way, let's hand it on over to Christian, who's going to jump right in. Hello, Christian. It is time to talk about Sudo.
Hello and welcome to Sudo Mode Part 2, How Privileges Mistakes Could Dismantle Your Entire Enterprise. So before we start with the standard things like agenda and moving to the presentation, let me share a small story that happened to one of our customers and is related to Sudo. Actually, it was not a huge enterprise, but quite big, around 2,000 employees, multiple Linux and Windows servers. And they use Sudo for the security purposes on all their Linux machines. However, they didn't follow the basic principles, which means that they use multiple Sudo files, different files on different servers. Sudo wasn't managed correctly, and due to that, they had multiple instances of, hopefully for them, small failures. Like someone moved the file in the wrong folder, someone reset the password of the wrong user, and 2 instances of bigger failures. One time, one of the developers was able to remove the whole machine with all the source code, which entitled administrators to perform a backup procedure. I tried to help them, and actually right now they follow the rules I will be talking today about, and it's much better. It's much more manageable, it's much more secure, and honestly, it's not more complicated than it should be. So when we are talking about Sudo, we don't need to make things too complicated, technical magic. No, we have to follow basic principles and we should be good to go. So, agenda for today's presentation. I will briefly describe how Sudo works. Then we'll discuss security checklist. So my recommendations for several security features you can do with Sudo. Obviously, not all possible security related options with Sudo will be discussed because we don't have a whole day for this presentation. I will show you the possibility of event logging in Sudo, and maybe I will show you a live example of using elk stack, how to display Sudo logs. And the last thing, often overlooked, is session recording of Sudo. So we can actually record all the commands that were executed by users with Sudo. Quite a neat feature, and many people don't know it, and even people who know it don't use it too often. However, it's also a great feature if you need to be compliant with one of the security standards. So let's dig in. What is Sudo? Sudo is a utility to delegate the authority to other users. Without Sudo, we would need to access our servers as a root user, which actually is pretty dangerous. And I'm talking about dangerous because all of us are making mistakes, typos. We're copying from text editor to shell over SSH. Sometimes copying the commands over is not the best. Some special character causes a failure. Okay, so sudo prevents me being constantly logged in as a root. Then, on top of it, with sudo, I can become other users. For instance, let's talk about Oracle database. For managing Oracle database, I don't need to be a root. Well, actually, I even should not be a root user. I should be Oracle user. Okay, and sudo can easily provide me this functionality. What else is included in sudo? Audit trail. Okay, when we are talking about all security standards, whatever you must comply with, all of them require some form of auditing. And sudo is actually a tool equipped with this possibility. Recording user session, and also sudo from operational perspective prevent password sharing. Okay, for multiple operations in Linux operating systems, you need to be root. This is how they was built. Linux were built on top of Unix systems, so there was one super user called root. Right now, if we would like to have 5 administrators to manage one server, without sudo, we would need to give them root password. That means that we don't have proper accountability for them. Sudo resolves this problem. How sudo works? Pretty simple. User log into a server. It can be either over SSH or console connection, or and executes a desired command, but the user prefixes the command with a sudo. Then sudo program checks the file etc sudoers, and this verification is performed to check if the user who tries to execute a command is allowed to execute it. Okay, I think that this is pretty straightforward. What is the basic structure of our sudoers files? It is always located in etc sudoers, and it defines several things. Who? So, for instance, John, a group, help desk. Then it defines where, on which systems. Okay, so here we provide host names or host aliases. I will speak about it in a second. Then we define as who this user can run a command. And finally, we specify what commands are allowed to be run by this user. Okay, this seems pretty straightforward. However, the first rule, you should have a single sudoers file across the whole enterprise. Okay, and if we are thinking about enterprises that have 200 servers, then it's not so simple. If we only stick to providing host names in etc sudoers, it would be a huge file. And if configuration files are huge, it's very easy to make mistake. The creator of sudo help us with this. we can use a host alias, which enable us to group servers, and then we just provide a host alias instead of 20 lines for different servers. The same goes to user alias. Let's say we've got a moderate size IT department, 40 Linux administrators. Instead of specifying what can be run by them on a username per basis on all servers, it's much better to create a user group, assign all user accounts to that group, and use that as a single line. Also, Sudo allows me to use local groups from Linux systems. And here the syntax is pretty straightforward. We prefix the group name with a % sign. That's all. It works automatically. So let me show you the first demo. One second. Where is my mouse? Okay, we're good to go. So, as you can see, I defined here a host alias, which allows me to group my database servers. Okay, and to this group, I added DB01 and DB02. On top of that, I also defined user alias, which allowed me to define a user group dbadmins, and here I've added Linux usernames. How this works? Here I'm using my user group. dbadmins are allowed on those servers db1 and db2 using host alias execute all commands as all users. Okay, so let's check if it works. Quickly copy, let's log in as Roger, and execute sudo user add -m bt. Okay, much better. User created. So it did work, and such definition of sudo allows you to make things simpler when it comes to management of multiple servers and multiple users. Now we can also restrict users to a single command or to a set of commands. When we are defining a set of commands, either we can use a comma separated list of commands or use command alias exactly in the same way as we did with host and user aliases. Okay, so from best practices perspective, you should always use command alias because it will save you time and prevent stupid mistakes such as typos. and you should never grant all as a command. Okay, I will show you also one more thing using this local group, because this is quite interesting. Multiple Linux software creates local groups and it can be handy for us. So let's quickly move here. Okay, as you can see, I'm using %, then a group name, help desk on DB servers. I will log in as Mike to my DB02 server. As you can see, Mike is a member of a help desk group. Obviously, if I would copy the Sudo files that I showed you, it would be much better. And of course, it worked. Pretty straightforward. Command aliases that I talked about can be defined like this. Either using comma separated list here. I wouldn't recommend this approach. Personally, I don't like it. It's very easy to make a mistake. Or much better approach, using command alias. Let me just search for it. Command alias, user management, user add, user mod, user del. And then we are just using, instead of all, my command group here. Let me demonstrate that it works. 07. I'm Mike. On machine DB02, a member of helpdesk group, and I will do a simple operation, removing user webinar that I created a minute ago and doesn't exist. However, if I would like to do vim system.ctl, for instance, Mike is not allowed to execute. Okay, so important lesson for you: always restrict access using command aliases. It will greatly improve your overall security. Now, probably you saw that I'm not using SCP or rsync for transferring my new version of Sudo file. I'm not, because I cannot recommend to any of my customers. Yes, you can do it in correct way and in a secure way. However, the problem is with SCP and rsync, you cannot check the syntax of sudoers file, and without it you can actually restrict yourself from accessing the box, you have to then have a console connection and log in locally as root to bypass sudo. So I would highly recommend use Ansible, Chef, Puppet, or any other tool that you are using for configuration management. In Ansible, Chef, Puppet, you can easily create a proper playbook that will always verify your sudoers file before distributing it to the target system. And this will prevent you the problems in the future. If you are in the situation that you are not using any configuration management tool, always use vsudo when you are editing sudoers file. Never use a standard text editor because they don't check the syntax. vsudo will handle it nicely. Another potential problem, local rule files. Sudo is capable of including additional files, not only etc sudoers, but also the files that are under etc sudoers.d. And please remember, in sudo, the last rule always wins. I'm not the biggest fan of additional files because, as I told you before, I would prefer to have a single file, or maybe if I've got multiple networks in one enterprise, 2 or 3 files for certain groups of servers, because communication between them can be blocked on a network level. Instead of defining a lot of smaller files, I think that when you are dealing with a lot of smaller files, you place under etc sudoers. First of all, you have to always analyze that last rule will win, so it's easy to override what someone else typed. And what I don't like is actually that sometimes we leave those files there and they are hanging for an attacker to use. So my advice, use one big file, easier to manage. Another option, becoming another user. This is pretty straightforward, so I won't do a demo for that, but it's good that you know it. When you are using sudo, you can become other user than root. So, for instance, on the slide, you've got an example that Maggie can become Freddy Krueger on DB servers and execute all commands, which is not recommended. However, it's nice placement for the start for the slide. I didn't have too much space. Best practices, definitely it can improve security, and on top of it, it offers you better permission granularity. So when you are drawing your permission architecture, then please bear in mind that sudo is capable of doing that. There are potential dangers with wildcards in the path, so also bear it in mind. Generally, if possible, don't allow arguments that are wildcards, because an attacker could easily use that if folder permissions are set incorrectly to replace our executable and perform an attack. So we should always start the path to the command with /. We should always provide a full path to the executable and never use star, which is a wildcard character in sudo. Additionally, you can use secure path, so you can define from what folders executables can be run. You can also restrict command arguments. So on the right side, you've got a good example of that. Vim is restricted only to edit etc my.cnf. And right now, I would like to present you one thing, because we'll move to preventing shell escapes. let me become Mike on machine DB2 and demonstrate you a quick thing. I will let a user, then I will modify this user by adding it to helpdesk group. Yep. If I would type sudo, I would be better off. Okay. Now we've got user called U1 in a group helpdesk. As you can see, when I executed sudo the second time, I wasn't asked for a password the second time. Why? Because by default, sudo tickets are valid for 5 minutes. Obviously, you can modify that, and I will show you how you can do it. I become root, and right now I will modify the default for sudo by providing timestamp timeout equal 0. In older version of sudo, you have to recompile the whole sudo package to modify it. In newer versions, you can modify it like I did. Let's exit. And remove user U1 and let's add app. Okay, as you can see, every time I try to execute something with sudo, I'm being asked for a password. So quite nice functionality that can improve your security. I will remove it for demo purposes. Okay, we're good to go. And going back to the presentation, preventing shell escapes. Okay, quite often when I'm performing audit, I see a common error. People allow a certain command for a certain user or user group. Cool. That's following one of the first principles. However, people often forget that tools like Vim, for instance, are capable to escape the shell. So when you allow through sudo, using Vim to modify MySQL configuration, a clever user can sudo Vim to modify this file, and then he can perform something called shell escape. And he can create, for instance, a backdoor account. So let me show you that. On a demo, I always believe that demonstration is better than slides. So as you can see, Rob is allowed to use vim to edit sysctl-conf. Pretty straightforward. Let me quickly copy the file. Okay. I will log in as Rob. Typos. Let me authenticate as Rob. And right now, the magic will happen. I'm in Vim, and I'm trying to perform a shell escape to bin bash. Bam! I just become root. So we've got something called unintended consequences. Your Linux admin tried to secure access to the system, but because he didn't think about possibility of shell escape, Rob is capable of having a root shell. And what Rob can do? Create a very nice account called HackerOne. Then Rob just needs to add HackerOne to root user group, and he's done. Okay, so you saw that shell escapes can have a really bad impact on your enterprise. So let me demonstrate how you can prevent shell escapes. This is very, very easy. Whenever you have to allow a user to edit a certain file, use sudo edit. This will prevent a shell escape. I still can run a shell escape, but I will be myself not a root user. So let's copy that. I will do exactly the same command. And as you can see, Vim is not allowed. Cool. So Rob must use sudo edit to modify this file. I still can try to perform a shell escape. Oh, it did work. However, let's check my token. I'm Rob. So if I'm Rob, I'm unable to create this user. Problem solved. Okay. So always think about preventing shell escapes. Another thing to prevent is obviously preventing running su, because su allows me to become another user, and if you allow su, it means that you have no proper auditing setup. So this is crucial, but it's very easy to prevent. You just define bin su, the standard location of su utility, and you prefix it with exclamation mark. Done. 1 second job improves your security huge. Then tracing with sudo. Actually, sudo was designed to provide a very nice auditing. So everything you type after when you execute sudo is logged into var log secure. However, if you need more information, you have to enable tracing. This will allow us to grab all input and output of the commands. Very nice. You can then just sit, relax, and review all the sessions, what your users did to your system. So this is important. Always enable logging output. Store sudo log files on a central management server. And please remember, if you decide to log input, sometimes it can be dangerous. For instance, sometimes users type confidential things or sensitive information into the system. So make your own decision because every environment is a little bit different. However, logging output and enabling tracing is a good way to do it. When you have tracing enabled, use sudo replay to just search and review the traces. Obviously, you can use built-in utilities like cat, zcat, zgrep to review those logs. However, sudo replay is much better tool to use. So let me quickly demonstrate this functionality because it's quite interesting. Let me just switch to my demo. And you define those things here. IO log directory, logged output, log input. Okay, so no problems here. Very easy to define. I will just copy the file. And I will log into the machine as user Maggie. I will modify the file and maybe let's make it root. Let's save it. I will run one more command. Maybe etc shadow. Okay, that's fine. I will exit. I will log in as root. You shouldn't allow, obviously, logging through SSH as root. However, in this case, for demo purposes, I will allow it. Okay, in var log sudo.io, the folder I defined, I've got all the sessions. So let's go to the last one. And let's review this one. Not too interesting because I should use zcat. Now we've got quite nice output. What I demonstrated with those not nice looking characters is that those files are zipped by default. So something for you to remember. So now let's play a little bit with sudo replay. This is quite interesting functionality. I just closed sudo replay. I will search all the sessions from user Maggie. So sudo replay -L allows me to define a filter. Maggie, as you can see, I've got a bunch of commands here, and I also got a session identifier. So let's select this session when I was editing a file as user Maggie. So we are just sitting and watching. Wow, pretty straightforward, I think. So you don't have to use zcat, slash, and so on to review those files. Sudo replay is capable of doing that. On top of filtering by user, we can filter by a command. Obviously, command Maggie doesn't exist, so let's use passwd. Okay, and we see that in 2017, Maggie executed this command to reset Rob's passport. And the last commonly used filter for searching sudo session identifiers is from date and to date. So let's use from date 2018 06 13. And as you can see, only the sessions newer than were returned. So that was pretty straightforward. Please use it. The last thing I want to tell you about, because I would like to give some time to my co-presenter, is that you should always put sudo in a central logging management servers. Sudo logs are important. And here is example. I'm using here elk stack. Those logs are from development system. Today, as you can see, I've got the possibility of reviewing the time, folder, a user, and also what command was executed. So here a user obviously is a user someone tried to become after executing sudo. A user who executed sudo is defined in this column. So that would be all from me today. I hope you like it, and I also hope that you will join me in my next webinar about sudo, when I will be talking about Active Directory integration.
Okay, thank you very much, Christian. So I'm gonna pick up right where you left off. And I guess actually before I begin, I will say that just like you said, you couldn't show all the features of Sudo in 45 minutes. Maybe not if you had a whole day. I'm in absolutely the same boat. Only I've got 10, 15 minutes here to talk a little bit about what we do at Beyond Trust, and specifically PowerBroker for Unix and Linux. Which just to be clear up front, it's absolutely a sudo replacement. It's the idea is to simplify some of the I guess controls or configuration that people have to do with sudo, as well as extend the power so that you get to do more control. Again, impossible to touch on all the things that we can do here in 10 or 15 minutes, but I will at least point out a couple of the highlights. And I guess I should also mention, let me just jump to the next slide, just so that we got something else to look at. At Beyond Trust, we do a range of things to do with privilege management or privilege access management. Today, obviously, we're focusing on server privilege management, i.e. your Unix and Linux servers, and specifically what I'm going to talk about is Unix and Linux. We do Windows workstations and servers as well. And I should also say that, again, I'm going to talk today about PowerBroker for Unix and Linux. We do have sudo enablement tools as well, which takes, the native sudo and makes it easier to use, easier to manage, that sort of stuff. So this is kind of like the the most powerful replacement we have. Again, just to highlight some of the features that we have as we go through here. The high level goal, if you like, of PowerBroker for Unix Linux is exactly the same as Sudo. The idea is to eliminate the sharing of privileged credentials, log and audit what users do. One of the differences that we have right out the gate is we do things or controls at the system level, not just at the command level. So without getting overly technical on this, it's simply with Sudo, it's Sudo command, whatever you type at the command line, that's really what's being analyzed. We can do exactly the same, in fact, often do exactly the same with PowerBroker for Unix and Linux, only we can also look at what the system's actually doing. So the system calls, things that actually get executed, or the changing of permissions, or the creating or deletion of files, that sort of stuff. In any case, I will hopefully have at least a minute or two to show you what that looks like as well. We're going to plow through these slides nice and quickly. I'm not really going to get into the I say shortcomings of Sudo. The only reason I leave this slide up is I will say that absolutely use Sudo. It's far better than doing nothing at all. If you find that Sudo isn't enough, or you like the look of some of the more powerful features we have, that's the reason to replace it. But again, I'm not here to talk negatively about Sudo in any way whatsoever. Like I say, we actually take that core concept and build upon that. So we'll just move, like I say, quickly through these slides so that we can actually do some demonstration of our software. Again, I won't labor this slide too long. There's other things that we have included in PowerBroker for Unix and Linux. I will hit a couple of the extra points. Remote system and application control. One of the great benefits of PowerBroker Unix and Linux is, rather than being all localized, you can actually say run this command on a remote host. That's kind of powerful for you really don't need to SSH to a machine. You can go and say just run this command over there, and again at privilege if need be, making that target host more secure. Also, file and policy integrity monitoring. I'll just talk about that one real quick. That's really important. Christian made reference a few times about not having wildcards in the path, and no exec to stop people escaping out of or shelling out of an application to get like root level control. One of the other things that's really important, again, particularly if you're just using Sudo, is make sure that when you type sudo command, you want to make sure that the command that you're elevating or running with privilege hasn't been tampered with. So file integrity is highly important. I would even say you also want to make sure that when you type in sudo something, that the sudo binary itself hasn't been tampered with. Yes, those binaries are owned by root. What you're running may or will almost certainly be some sort of privileged binary. That's why you're using sudo to run it. But again, you want to make sure that the thing that actually does the elevation, so sudo, or in our case, it would be pbrun, and the thing that you're actually elevating, make sure they've not been tampered with. Again, we bundle that into our product. You just get that. There are obviously third-party products out there, Tripwire being the most common, but there are other variants as well. All I'm saying is, make sure that's a very important part of, or something that you definitely cover when you're dealing with privilege and privilege elevation. Okay, so this slide again, I'll talk quickly to this. If you think back to Christian's presentation, or one of the slides he had up, he was saying, use Ansible, Chef, Puppet to effectively synchronize your sudoers file out. In fact, he actually did that in his demo a few times. Our philosophy is very different. We're centralized by design. So what we do is we actually store effectively a single policy file in a single location. Obviously, we do support multiple policy files and multiple servers for high availability, redundancy. But the difference is, rather than pushing that policy out, we actually have the clients go and reference a central server when they actually want to do elevation and say, am I allowed to run this? So you don't actually get caught up with synchronization and propagation delays. It's all centralized by default, including the audit information as well. That will be written directly to centralized and dedicated and secured log servers, so that those log files can't be tampered with, and they're already in a central location and everything else. Advanced control and audit, again, I've touched on this already. It's that system level control. It allows you to effectively give somebody a root level shell, but still control what that user can do. It allows you to do things like audit what happens inside of a script or control what happens inside of a script. You can look at all system function calls that happen on the system. I will show you that once we get to the demo here in just about another 30 seconds or so. File integrity monitoring, I've already talked about this, so I won't hang on this slide too much. Again, just saying it's very important. Make sure you do it if you've not thought about it before now. And then forensics, again, Christian touched on playing back, using the playback tools or using ELK actually to view some of the Sudo information. One of the big benefits you obviously get with a commercial product is a whole bunch of canned reporting. There's a couple of things on the screen. We'll hopefully have a chance to touch on that as well when we get to the demo. Last slide is architecture. Again, I don't want to hang too long here on slideware. But again, just pointing out that we have basically two separate components. You have the client. You can think of that as the Sudo binary. And then there's an additional component, the policy server and the log server. They can be the same machine, they can be separate machines, but effectively the client goes and talks to the policy server in order to get elevated rights. That also takes care of the various types of logging that we do, such as event logging, who did what, where, and when, session recording, the whole putting a video camera on the screen, indexing it, and making it available for playback, and then also sending that data out to SIMs. We've got our own SIM called Beyond Insight. You could do ELK, Splunk, ArcSight, QRadar. Really doesn't matter what. You can push that data out. All right, so I did say I was going to go through that as quickly as possible, so I apologize for the rush, but I wanted to save a few minutes at the end to really show some of the differences or maybe some of the power that you get with a tool like PowerBroker for Unix and Linux. So I'm going to dive straight into this. Let's zoom in a little bit just so you can see what I'm doing. So I'm just logged on to one of the servers in my lab. I've made it nice and simple. I've got server 1, 2, and 3. Server 1 is where basically all the authorization and login or auditing happens. Server 2 and 3 are effectively like my client machines. My usernames are nowhere near as interesting as Christian's. I'm actually going to quit out of there and go back to my user called demo 1. I've got demo 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, but we'll make demo 1 just to make life nice and simple. So he's logged on. If I type who am I, obviously it returns the user that I'm logged on as. Just to show anyone who still doesn't get the whole elevation piece, if I prefix it with pbrun, it'd be the same as prefixing it with sudo. It basically goes through the elevation process. Now in my lab, again, I print out some additional information just so you can see what's going on under the covers, or else it would be, would actually look exactly the same as sudo. But it actually goes to a separate server, in my case, server 1, and that actually does the authorization. So if I was to go and update my policy in that central location, it would apply immediately to this server. It tells me who the user is it's actually going to run the command as, which is root. So obviously the who am I command just returns the user that I'm running, which in this case is going to be root. Now, I'm going to shortcut and just show you a few various things, again, just to kind of like show when I talk about this being a sudo replacement, what that really means. If I was to do pbrun getEnt, that happens to be a command that does group checking. So here, basically, I output some information saying I detected all of these groups for the user. I guess I should have done an ID command. You'll actually see that the groups for this user match what the PowerBroker product actually discovered. And it says here, you're not a member of the group called Linux admins, therefore you can't run this command. So it's basically just doing some group checking to say I have to belong to a group. If I had more time, I would go and add the user to the group and we would do it again, but we don't need to demonstrate all of that. You're going to see some stuff actually getting authorized in a second. If I run the du command, this basically says you got to retype your password, same way as what you get with sudo. We can prompt for, well, because this is an Active Directory user, it's prompting me for my AD password. If I type in my password correctly, the command runs. I'll just do it again just for so you can actually see if I do the password wrong 3 times, I choose to give myself 3 attempts. Obviously it fails and the command is rejected. If I was to do one more command, I have to do a GP update. So because I've got my Beyond Trust AD Bridge installed, I can do things like group policy onto this system. To do a GP update actually requires privilege elevation. It also requires, in this case, me to enter a password from a two-factor token. I'm actually going to skip that again just to save us a little bit of time. And then those, again, somewhat replicating what you get with Sudo. It's, again, a little bit more advanced, a little bit easy to configure, custom messages, that sort of stuff. But if I was to string some of that together and do a command like pbrun SQL, so what I'd normally do from the command line would be run SQL plus. SQL is obviously not a Unix command, and it's certainly not on this host either. So if I just run pbrun SQL, it'll actually go and do a whole bunch of things for me. So again, all driven by policy. What this is saying is the command is accepted by that central server. It's actually going to run the command as user Oracle. So again, elevating the command to the Oracle user, not the not root in this case. Then it goes off and it connects to another server altogether. So it's actually going to run this on my Oracle Linux box, and it's going to log me into Oracle using the HR user. In addition, I've put out a warning that the session is being recorded. The recording file name, or the recording location, is actually on server 1. Again, that's highlighted here, but you don't have to tell people this, obviously. And the location is going to go into a folder called IO logs. The file itself is completely dynamic in naming. I've done mine with the date, the time, the server that I'm connecting to. In this case, it's Oracle Linux 6. The user was demo1 who made the request, and the command he typed was SQL. But again, you can use any of the variables that we have to build that name however you like. So this user is now logged in. I can do things like, my SQL is really bad, but we'll do select star from departments, maybe, if I can type that correctly. And I'm able to do stuff. Now, just because I'm in an application, one of the things we can do with Power Broker is we can still control what the user does. So if I try and do a drop on a table, I can intercept that command, kick the user out. And again, there's a lot of variations of that as well. I'll show you one other thing that I think is kind of cool. If I do pbrun sn ticket, and what this will do, it says, give me a short description for my ticket. It's actually going to make a ServiceNow ticket for me. So I'll do demo, what day is it? Thursday. I don't know why I'm not putting a space in there, but we'll do the same thing. Demo on Thursday, something like that. We'll make it a priority 1. Gives me a summary of my ticket, and now it actually goes ahead and creates that ticket directly in ServiceNow for me. Again, that's all being driven by Power Broker Unix and Linux. There's my instant number. Again, that could have come to me via email, but now I have the ability to do something like pbrun, I'm going to say ServiceNow bash. And what this says is, in order to get this elevated shell, you need a valid ticket number. Well, I've just created one because I was able to do that. That will then go off, validate that I've got that is a valid instant, and that it's the right priority, it's the right assignment, all of that good stuff. And I'll say demo again real quick. And we'll let that come through. And now you can see I've got a root level shell. The instant number has been assigned to my prompt. I can even do things like pbrun sn update. So we'll just do an update. This is an update. And that will then go and update my ticket for me directly in ServiceNow. So if you memorize the ticket number 10832, I can actually hop over to a browser. We go into ServiceNow, and I go and look at all of my tickets. And there's my ticket, demo Thursday. It's critical. We'll actually just dig into this ticket really quickly. I'm not going to get to some of the stuff I wanted to show you, but there's the actual ticket that I opened. What I typed demo on Thursday. The ticket name itself was demo Thursday at the top. You can see it was opened by Power Broker Unix and Linux. It's been assigned to the Unix operations group. There was my description I typed in. This was me doing an access request. Not only do I see the access request from user demo1 requesting access as root on that server, there was my reason I gave. There's the session recording file that's been associated with it, and then doing the update from the command line as well. Now, if we had more time, some of the other stuff I was going to go through is we got full integration with Splunk. We can actually dig into all the session audit data. It goes way more granular than just commands that people are requesting. There's a whole web-based management console on here that allows me to discover systems, deploy the software, manage all the policies. Is probably the last thing I will touch on. Just come in here, pick a server, and we go to role-based policy. So in here, effectively, you can use this to create groups of users, commands, hosts, times. You can even do custom scripting if you really want to. But the idea is most of your roles or your rules can all be done via a nice simple GUI. Again, we do fully support script-based policy as well. So if you're more happy with like the script-based policy you get with Sudo, you can come in here and there's a full script editor. You can use Vi, of course. We've got all the syntax checking and that sort of stuff. But in any case, there's a whole bunch that we do with recording and playback and that sort of stuff, which unfortunately we just ran out of time today, which I had a feeling I was going to. But it is a nice segue to, I guess, turn it back over to Sarah for our final poll. So I'll just get back to the slides and turn it over to Sarah.
Great. Thank you so much, Paul. Yeah, so like Paul said, there is so much more that we can show. And I know that we didn't have a ton of time for Paul to really get super granular in the demoing, but if you'd like to schedule a more thorough and personalized one-on-one demo for PowerBroker for Unix Linux or any of our other PAM products, select yes, and then somebody will be in contact with you scheduling that out. And then you can ask all of your specific questions during that demo and get into the nitty-gritty of PBUL. So I'm going to leave this up. I know we're past our time right now, so if you need to leave, go for it. But Paul, I had a couple questions come in for you. So let's go ahead and jump into that. Paul, we use Sudo today. Is there a migration option from Sudo to PowerBroker for Unix?
So there is, but we normally discourage people from using it. The reason is because we offer a lot more power than what you get with Sudo. We find that people that just migrate their sudoers file end up not really going any further. So they effectively end up with the same controls, just in another product. But without dragging this on too long, we have ways of, if that's really what you want to do, there's cheaper options than PowerBroker Unix and Linux that we offer that allow you just to centralize that sudoers file or do grouping of sudoers files and apply it to certain hosts and do management all via the web interface, get all the reporting. So it's probably best if you just do a follow-up with, check the box to say you want somebody to contact you and talk through your options. But yeah, just migrating the sudoers file, we can do that for you.
Paul, your privilege delegation tool looks good for interactive users, but what about scripts and scheduled jobs?
So scripts, unfortunately, I didn't have a chance to get to my demo. It would have been the next thing I go and show. So we got full control over scripts. Scheduled jobs you can absolutely do so long as you execute them through PowerBroker, and that can be done via a number of ways. You can actually amend the launcher mechanism. You can actually do the same with Sudo, just prefix things that get called with Sudo, or in our case, pbrun. We also have shells that, as long as you run it using one of our shells, then that will also then audit or track or control what happens there. It is obviously, like Sudo, a solution that's designed primarily for interactive sessions. I mean, that's really where the benefit comes. But if you just want to audit that data, we have a fast-growing DevOps community now that just want to fire off stuff across a large number of systems at the same time and just audit what's going on. So yeah, again, we can do a lot more than what you can do with Sudo, right out of the box.
Okay, guys, a reminder that you'll receive a follow-up email containing links to the recording and the slides shown here today within 1 to 2 business days from now. I want to be cognizant of everybody's time and wrap this up. Thank you guys so much for being here today. Thank you, Paul and Christian. A lot of stuff, a lot of information and content to push into 60 minutes. So I appreciate you guys talking fast and moving quickly through your demos and trying to get as much in as possible. Again, you guys will be receiving a follow-up email. Thanks again for being here today. We will see you at our next one. Take care, everybody, and goodbye.